episode 84 of the Sports Marketing Machine podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Neiser. Today, we're going to talk all about improving your fan experience. And today, we're getting counsel from someone outside of the sports world that has a tremendous wealth of knowledge around creating an exceptional experience. I'd like to introduce Steve Robinson. Steve spent 35 years as the Chief Marketing Officer at Chick-Fil-A. Today, we're talking all about how they studied brands, the evolution of the second mile service, how Chick-fil-A learned how to listen to customers effectively and innovate. So Steve, appreciate you coming to the podcast.
Jeremy, my pleasure. Appreciate it.
Kind of had a feeling you would say that. So there's lots of podcasts, lots of interviews you've done talking about the leadership side, but we're going to talk about kind of the four walls, what's happening inside. And I remember hearing a story how you talked about the senior leadership, and we took an unfast food approach to creating a better experience. And you started studying brands that create an engaging experience and not treating their customers as a transaction. So right. What did you do? I know BMW was a big one. And what were some early takeaways as you started to dig into that?
Well, first of all, why did we even look at that?
Mm-hmm.
Early in my career at Chick-fil-A, I started there in 81. In the first 2 or 3 years, we were marketing Chick-fil-A kind of like everybody else in the fast food space. I used to say chasing transactions. And the tendency is when you do that, you focus on price, deals, offers, where basically you're trying to buy transactions. And it not only devalued the brand, it was hard to market that way because you never knew how people were going to respond to the offers you put in the marketplace. And as I share in my book, Covert Cows and Chick-fil-A, in 1982, we actually had a promotion blow up. I mean, it just, it over-redeemed. And it led me and my team to step back and say, wait a second. Our product's terrific. It's worth full price. And now at this time we're only in malls too, so we're dealing with an upscale client base. What are we doing? Doing it like everybody else. And we stepped back and we decided we're going to have to figure out a way to market Chick-fil-A ultimately where people are willing to pay full price and they feel good about it. So that's how the journey started. Okay. So the early years of Chick-fil-A, we basically, because we were in malls, we said, okay, how can we turn the mall, rather than just in a place of doing business, turn it into a place of entertainment and make the mall the medium. So we literally, from the menu board out, we started designing marketing programs where operators weren't discounting, weren't dealing, weren't couponing, but they were inviting customers into their restaurants, but with forms of entertainment, with added value offers with other merchants in the mall. So we're sampling out there, we're doing food prep demonstrations, we're squeezing lemons, we're giving away free ice cream, we're working with other major tenants where people get a free Chick-fil-A sandwich if they engage with that tenant somehow. So we just said we're not going to deal, and we're going to figure out ways to add to the experience. And we're going to make this, we basically said we're going to turn the front of the store into a television screen. We started thinking like the front of the store as entertainment. So I won't go into any more detail than that, but that's how it started. Then we started doing freestanders, and the role of the brand, which was in mid-80s, 86 was the first freestanding restaurant. Suddenly the role of the brand is much more important because now we're competing with the other big boys. And again, we didn't want to do marketing like they were doing, which was principally not just focus on transactions, but most of the decisions and most of the money was being spent out of the home office. Whether it was Burger King, McDonald's, didn't matter who it was. We had these tremendous operators, independent contractors running our restaurants. We still felt they were in the best position to build the brand, market the business, not only in their mall, but now out in the community where they have a store on the street. and we started figuring out how do we do that. And so the first major step was we're going to figure out how to emotionally engage with people in our community. Okay? So that led to developing promotional concepts, partner concepts that operators could take to their schools, to their fire departments, to their police stations, to sporting venues, athletic departments, where we're bringing added value to those partners. We're not just doing catering or food service, but we're actually bringing added value to them, helping them with fundraisers, catering their events, letting them make a markup margin on it, etc. We're delivering a lot of free food to office buildings and institutions around those stores. And we're not just dropping it off at the door. We're going in, we're setting it up, and we're giving people a Chick-fil-A experience in the context of their own location, their own office, their own business. So that was the beginning of how do we leverage these independent operators running our restaurants to actively build relationships and awareness, trial, without discounting, without couponing. That evolved to stores hiring their own marketing director, and we started to help develop training programs for them so they could consistently have a marketing calendar. We developed creative resources for those directors to use in their marketing. And we marketed the business like that for almost 10 years, basically focused on equipping the operator and their designated full-time local marketing director to build these community emotional relationships and connections and become partners. So in a sense, a partner people couldn't live without in their neighborhood. Right. But then we got enough stores in the marketplace in Atlanta and a few other markets where we needed to start thinking about, okay, what is it we can do for the brand out of the home office that only we can do? The operators still do what they've been doing now for the better part of 10 years in the community, the streets of their community. Well, what is it we need to be doing to help them even more? So we'd already done a lot with the menu. We'd done a lot with store design. And we set out on our venture, okay, how do we look at great brands? Because the implication of that question was, we got to figure out how to make Chick-fil-A a brand people can't live without. So we spent time studying BMW, Nordstrom's, Southwest Airlines when they were hot as a brand, Ritz-Carlton, Zappos, a couple of sports franchises like the Boston Red Sox and the Cowboys. And we physically visited these companies, their retail, their customer-facing storefronts or venues. We spent time with management. We tried to understand how they listen to customers, collect data. And along the journey, we discovered one of the crucial issues would be measurement. How do we know we're being successful in the effort? And I'll touch on that in a minute. And we came back from those, and we spent something like the better part of 6 months visiting, benchmarking these other great brands. And we started to get a feel for how they are very clear about what they want their brand to represent. What's the brand promise? They build their entire not just marketing, but their entire operating plan around how to deliver that brand promise. Operations, marketing, technology, media, etc. And they measure, are we being successful? Not just in terms of sales, but they measure customers' loyalty, they measure customers' habits, they listen to them in focus groups, etc., etc. So we took those learnings and we stepped back, and over a period of basically another 10 years, we refined the menu, and I can go into any of these details you like, but we refined the menu further. we started working on an aggressive customer-facing technology plan, literally starting with website, app, interactive customer-friendly app, back of the house and front of the house, and drive-through systems for customers to interface with our teams, but having the right technology in the hand of the teams to give the customer the best experience. And then eventually even the whole issue of hospitality, how we interact with them face to face. And we really got that clue from the Ritz-Carlton. It all started with our founder's fascination with the phrase "my pleasure." And when we got a handle on how they do that, how Southwest was so good at engaging customers, how Zappos managed to do it over the phone, we set on literally a 7-year journey of designing a hospitality model, researching the behaviors that customers would really appreciate. They weren't intrusive, but would add value to their experience, would make us unique. In many cases, it was also learning from white tablecloth restaurants like some of Danny Meyer's restaurants in New York and some of the better ones in Atlanta. How do we bring some of those service habits into our restaurant? And then using customer research, principally focus groups, understanding what were the hospitality habits that people really liked, appreciated. And then the hard work started.
And that's when it began.
Well, that's when we had to start testing the implementation of how do you implement a set of standard habits, just like 2 crucial pickles on a sandwich, every time. How do you do that with hospitality, 7 or 8 key habits every time across 50,000 team members? And of course, now that number's pushing 300,000. So how do you design behavioral standards? How do you visualize and role model what those standards look like and sound like? How do you develop training for them? How do you measure whether they're being done in the restaurant consistently, just like 2 pickles consistently, or the waffle fries are always right and hot? And then the biggest hurdle was operators weren't convinced that it would actually help their business, that it might end up just costing them more money in labor and slowing down their service. So the hard part was gearing up a large sample of test stores to run the play, to run the hospitality play, complete with behavioral expectations, training, measurement, and run it long enough to see the impact on sales. So the ultimate sample of over 100 stores that test ran for over a year, so we could measure results. And what do you know? Same store sales in those stores almost doubled the rest of the chain. Wow. So I've given you a very long answer on the journey of going from just focusing on selling more sandwiches to how to create emotional connections with your customers and your partners in the community, to being very customer centric in the way you design the guest experience, the food, the hospitality. Ultimately, the same kind of systems were used to evaluate the cow campaign and the cow creative. No commercial went out, no billboard went out that we didn't pre-test with samples of customers. How did they react? Did they laugh? What did they love about the spot or the billboard? What didn't they like? No different. And I'll pause there, but I will tell you the common theme through all that, and I've just given you a high flyby of a 30-year journey. The common theme underneath all that was intense customer listening research infrastructure.
So digging into the focus group piece of this, because you were sitting there spending time with the customers, what are you asking them? What questions were you asking?
Well, I mean, if it was around the issue of menu items, we'd have sample menu items, prototype menu items, not only for Chick-fil-A, but in comparison to other competitive fast food offerings. And they would be they would literally be tasting and sampling these products and not knowing whose was whose, ABC kind of stuff. And we're getting feedback on what they like about the product, the way it looks, the way it smells, the way it tastes, the way it eats, the way it's packaged, the price is X, the way it's priced. That was some of our early learnings, was around menu improvement. And then we took that same focus into innovation around hospitality. We sat around tables with customers and we demonstrated with videos or storyboards behavioral patterns, habits. We got their reactions to them. We then took the next stage with both the food and the hospitality. We would take them into small samples of restaurants. We'd serve those products. We then do intercept studies with people in the restaurants and ask them questions about their experience with that sandwich or that particular menu item. Or we let them go through their whole guest experience with the hospitality thing, not really knowing what was going on. And then we catch them as they're about to leave and say, by the way, do you notice anything different about your experience at Chick-fil-A today? And then inevitably they would say yes. What did you like? What anything surprised you? What didn't you like? The things you like, what did you like about it? So that's where ultimately it was all those conversations in small rooms and in small samples of stores, face to face, that resulted in driving innovation around menu, around hospitality, around the cow campaign. And even in the context of sports, when we became the sponsor of the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, we would try things in the venue, not only in the dome, but in the Congress Center, in the events outside around the stadium where we were doing fan engagement stuff. We were doing all kinds of research out there too, conversations with fans, to help not only help us better get a sense of how do we market Chick-fil-A, but in the case of the bowl, even helping the bowl staff, how do we create a better overall bowl experience? So we're not going to be a bottom third bowl anymore. Okay. We're going to be a top tier bowl game. Well, what does that look like? And most importantly, what is it the customers, the fans tell us that makes us a top 6 or top 7 bowl game? So same process. Now then, once you start actually rolling things, once you've rolled out a menu item, you've rolled out menu improvements, you've rolled out hospitality, you've rolled out new technologies in the restaurant, in the drive-through, then you do quantitative studies using phone calls or internet or mystery shopper intercepts to get quantitative data on what people feel about what they ate or the experience they had, the interaction they had. And you make feedback from the customer easy for the customer to give you. 800 numbers, internet connection, a website connection on the back of every receipt, randomly handing out a free sandwich if you would pull over in that parking spot and give me 2 minutes for a short questionnaire. And so the institutionalized process of listening to the customer becomes a habit. Well, then the habit creates data that drives performance. And over time, what happened was a lot of this data that we were collecting on an ongoing basis, not just for innovation, but for performance evaluation, became major data points to evaluate operator performance, their candidacy for maybe a new location or a second location, or if there were potential issues in the data, to be able to troubleshoot with them on how to improve their performance, whether it was operational or hospitality or whatever. So when you're dealing with a restaurant that's performing $8, $9, $10 million a year, that's a lot of customers, and you need a broad, consistent flow of information to help maintain continuous improvement, maintain performance, spot problems early, and then you got not only the operator on site to deal with issues and get things fixed, but you got people in the field operations group or the finance group or the marketing group looking at this data, and they're reaching out to Joe Blow operator because his or her data is suspect. It's not what it ought to be. So the whole system, quality of performance in the whole system rises as your data feedback systems get better and you tie accountability to the performance that data reflects. So I can't tell you, I don't know how many, I'm not going to tell you the amount. We were spending millions on research every year when I left, and that's been 7 years ago. So I don't know what they're doing now, but with a chain of about 3,200 locations, they're collecting data on every one of those stores. They're evaluating the brand in the restaurant, but they're also evaluating the brand in their markets using data collection at the market level. And they're evaluating the brand nationally. So that the bottom line is customer feedback is the driving force of continuous improvement and keeping your brain relevant.
You hit the nail right on the head. I love the fact that Chick-fil-A never just sat, hey, we've got all these stores, we're doing really well. We're always going to be listening to the customer. We're always going to be innovating. So it says a lot about the staff. It says a lot about kind of the passion and the vision.
Well, Jeremy, I think one of the reasons you see that is because the business is still privately owned. And so you have leadership that doesn't turn over every 3 or 4 or 5 years. Not only the ownership family, but the key leadership, they stay. They have a long-term horizon to the business. We're trying to build, when Troy Cathy hired me in 1981, I asked him what he was looking for in the idea of marketing director, and he said, I have no idea. I just don't want to do it. But he did say, I want a healthy business. I want a business that has the potential to grow. How did he put it? To grow effectively and efficiently every year. And I don't want stops and starts in innovation and investments. I want a continuous growth mentality in this business. Now, he didn't talk about brand, but the evolution, of course, was the entire organization started to understand that brand was the hub of the wheel for the entire organization to do what he wanted. You grow the brand, you keep the brand healthy, you keep it relevant, you keep it top of mind, you maintain a consistent level of respect and engagement with customers, and over a long period of time you create a lot of brand fans. You're going to be healthy. But it would not, I don't think it would have ever happen, Jeremy, if it wasn't a family-owned business, still is, had clear purpose. I talk about the purpose in the book. Glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us, and we have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. Not a word of that purpose has changed. It was written in 1982. And I share that story in my book. A brand promise that is focused on caring about every customer with a high value around hospitality. I won't unpack it, but it's one sentence. And the entire operating plan is designed to deliver on that brand promise. Now, the other thing that reflects, the ownership reflects, and a long-term horizon reflects, and the fact that they don't have traditional investor franchisees, but they own all the locations, is they're in a position to reinvest in the stores as they please. Well, because they have developed a culture of being customer-centric, intentionally, institutionally, consistently, week in and week out listening to customers, something very interesting started to happen about 5 or 6 years ago. They now spend more money reinvesting on the existing stores than they spend on new stores.
Interesting.
Now, why are they doing that? Well, part of it is helping the operators to maintain the ability to handle the volume operation.
Mm-hmm.
But fundamentally, they're doing it to keep the brand experience great.
Mm-hmm.
to keep it so the operators can still deliver the brand promise, and they can still do it in under 2 minutes, and everything is still on brand promise. The food is, the customer service is, the technology interface is, the speed of service is, etc. Mm-hmm. And that has required major innovations, redesigns, remodels, and in many cases tearing down existing stores and building new ones. Mm-hmm. Most franchisee organizations can't do that because the franchisees that hold the contracts aren't willing to make those kind of investments. Mm-hmm. Many of them are more interested in their real estate portfolio than they are running a great restaurant. Mm-hmm. Where Chick-fil-A is focused on, when Truett Cathy hired the COO, Jimmy Collins, mm-hmm. Jimmy told this story often. Jimmy asked him, "What do you want from me as the COO?" Mm-hmm. He says, "I want you to open restaurants and keep them open."
That's simple.
That's
it.
But many franchise organizations can't do that because the franchisees aren't willing to make the investment necessary to keep them open and keep mm-hmm. them successful. So that the underpinnings of this business, which most people don't see, are wrapped up in private ownership, clear purpose, clear brand promise, a culture that places a high value on not only every customer, but a high value on every person that's associated with the Chick-fil-A brand. Mm-hmm. Truett wanted to create an environment where people could thrive. I did. I worked there for almost 35 years. I stayed because I thrived. I loved it. I wasn't always looking over my shoulder for the next political game or stakeholders putting pressure on quarterly earnings and another rotation of leadership at the top. We didn't have any of that. Mm-hmm. And that transcends all the way down to the operator, independent contractor running those restaurants. They share in the profitability of those restaurants. They're not going anywhere either. Mm-hmm. And so their institutional learning, along with what's going on in the home office, their institutional learning is continuing to make their restaurant better. And what they learn, they're feeding back into the system for continuous improvement throughout the entire organization. So a large percentage of the innovation that has occurred at Chick-fil-A during my 35 years was either initiated by or heavily influenced by the independent operators that we worked with on ultimately what hit the menu or hit the restaurant in the form of hospitality or operational systems. So that may be more than you wanted to know, but to go back to your earlier point, all that operationally, all that strategic infrastructure is underpinned by research.
Yep, love it. So 2008, the economy in America is in the dumps. Fast food restaurants are trying to stack up, save money. They're cutting employees' hours, even laying off employees. Chick-fil-A went on the offense and created the second mile service. Can you unpack what this is and why the team decided to just dump a whole lot of money into improving the hospitality experience for fans?
Yeah. Well, we've had several, and I already gave you a little of this, but we had several years in the late 90s and early 2000s of focusing on operational excellence, and we were using data to do it. And quite frankly, we even learned a lot from talking about benchmarking companies. We learned a lot operationally from Lexus on their zero defects culture, but more importantly, how they translated that theme, that idea, into operational reality. And we literally had operators studying Lexus manufacturing facilities. We weren't no compete, so they were very generous to let us learn. And we had about an 8 or 10 year journey where we were translating their learnings into operational performance to reduce the variance in what the customer experienced with their food and cleanliness and speed, etc. Well, by the mid 2000s, that had paid a lot of dividends. Consistency was much, much higher. Off-brand was much, much lower, put it another way. Mm-hmm. And same-store sales was healthier than the rest of the industry. But that was 4 or 5% per year. Mm-hmm. Now, that's pretty darn, in the fast food industry, particularly back in the 2000s, that was strong. Mm-hmm. But it was actually Truett Cathy who gave us, if you would, the clue that the next opportunity for Chick-fil-A to innovate was not going to be the menu, but it was going to be hospitality. He had been in a couple of Ritz-Carltons. He had experienced the interaction of people constantly saying "my pleasure" when he said "thank you." He experienced it with every employee in the hotel. He noticed how contagious it was. Great eye contact. People were smiling. And the thing he most enjoyed about it was he could tell it was genuine. Mm-hmm. He could tell that the "my pleasure" attitude was contagious, and it affected how people behaved. And for 2 or 3 years, he had challenged the operators at the national meeting to teach your team members to say that. Mm-hmm. They were kind of dragging their feet because they thought it would slow things. The operators thought it would just slow things down. So when we realized, particularly Dan Cathy and a few others who were hanging around Truett, realized he was very serious about it. We decided, let's put together a small team. Let's figure out how not only Ritz-Carlton does it consistently, hotel to hotel, but we started benchmarking other brands where they were given consistent, great service, hospitality experiences. And I mentioned some. We went to Nordstrom's. We went to several restaurants that Danny Myers operates up in the New York City area. Mm-hmm. We spent time at USAA Insurance out in Texas. We spent time with Southwest Airlines. We visited Zappos, their headquarters. So we sat in their huge room where all the operators sat with their headsets, talking to customers on the phone, and we listened to these conversations, etc. Okay, we visited BMW. We went to Germany. We went to Munich. And what we brought back was this very each company had we went to Nike. Every company had a very clear brand promise. So, for example, Nike.
Trey Roth.
Excuse me. I apologize to you and your viewers. We went to Nike, and they told us the brand promise here is to help people discover the athlete within you. So everything around it was, you want to be like Mike? You want to be like Bo Jackson? That grew out of the whole premise. There can be an athlete within you, but you're not going to do it without a pair of Nike shoes.
That's right.
and it worked. But that's just one illustration. The ultimate driving machine, BMW. Well, when you visit BMW, that idea permeates their culture. Drives engineering, drives design, drives marketing, right down to the way you feel when you put your fanny in the seat of the car. So anyway, we bring these experiences back to what we heard around the clear brand promise. Basically, the fundamental principle was to design the entire brand experience around that brand promise. And we did a bunch of research, and we discovered that the greatest strength of Chick-fil-A, even though the food was terrific, because of the operators and their team members, the greatest Chick-fil-A strength was actually the interaction with their team members, our people. And we wrote a brand promise where good meets gracious based upon that research. That's you come to Chick-fil-A. Now, we didn't publish it, but internally, that's the brand promise we want to create and deliver, where good meets gracious. Good food, good environment, good people, good service, no matter where they experience this, in the restaurant, in the drive-thru, somewhere in the community, at the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, does not matter. Well, the big missing piece was hospitality. And so we focused on doing, as I mentioned, doing customer research, focus groups, trying to get a handle on what could we do to if you will, add garnish to the experience. And I won't take you through the whole thing because I already top lined some of it. But we settled initially on 7 behaviors: refreshing drinks without being asked, cleaning tables without being asked and not being noticed, carrying large orders, flowers on the table, umbrellas when it's raining to help guests to their cars, carrying large orders to the car, and I'm forgetting one.
Eye contact?
My pleasure, eye contact. There, you see, that was top of the list. My pleasure, eye contact. And you cannot say my pleasure and eye contact without smiles. And so the net of it was, what we heard from customers when we started testing these behaviors was, you know what I love about this? You're showing respect. You're actually acknowledging that I'm there, you know. And the more we worked on it, the more we started also saying, you're showing me that you care that I'm there. You care about me. And so we rolled it into 100 test stores, and that took over a year and a half. And everything I just described took 7 years to develop, test, and convince the operators it was in fact more profitable to operate this way. We developed the training programs. Like we did in marketing, we designed a hospitality director role for every store, key point of leadership, and all the training resources that person would need for vetting and recruiting talent. Because one of the things we learned was when you attract people with the gift of hospitality, they attract more people with the gift of hospitality. And we had to convince the operators, look, the lead person with the gift of hospitality does not have to be you. But you got to have somebody who is on point, who loves hospitality. But then we got to channel their energy around hospitality to deliver our promised performance, our promised behaviors. Now, those behaviors have been modified and added to many innovations. But what we also did along that journey was, all right, how are we going to measure this? Because we not only want to see it affect same-store sales, we want to make sure it is actually making the brand stronger. And we elicited the help from a friend of ours, Fred Reichel, who used to be with the Bain Company. He wrote a book called The Ultimate Question. The theme of that book, or the thesis of that book, was what happens when you ask people this question. Based upon your experience at this Chick-fil-A today, how likely are you to recommend it to a family member or a friend? 1 to 10. 1 is a dead. You're dead in the water. 10 is perfect. And the thing that he discovered in his research was that 9 and 10s become raving fans of the brand, whoever that brand is. And in fact, 10s are the ones that are the most active advocates for the brand, come the most often, tell people more, spend more. So we set out on a theme with operators. Okay, how do we're going to measure 10s. We're going to use that question to measure how many 10s you have in your restaurant. People who rate you a 10. And when we first started doing that, the number was chain-wide, about 6% of our customer base was giving us tins. And I don't know what it is now, Jeremy, but when I left, it was about 6%, and the last time I talked to my successor about it, it was in the 20s.
That's awesome.
So it's unbelievable, which is one of the reasons our volumes are growing the way they're growing. It's not because of all the money Chick-fil-A spends on marketing. It's because of all these brand advocates talking about the brand and recommending it and going more often and et cetera. So Fred's research informed how he structured our research around that question. And then underneath the diagnostics of what people liked or didn't like, the food experience, the hospitality experience, and that's the data they use to evaluate the performance of every restaurant. And it measures TENS is the measure of brand health. It's the other thing. The other thing that became an interesting measure of brand health was we kind of taught ourselves, and I give Dan Cathy a lot of credit for this, taught ourselves that when we walk in a restaurant, before we do anything, we're going to walk in as a customer, and he used to say we're going to turn left. And what he meant was we're not going to turn right and go into the kitchen and back to the operator's office. We're going to turn left in the dining room, and we're going to wander around the dining room and look at customers, look what's going on, listen. We're going to sit down and have a meal and watch and listen. And in 10 or 15 minutes, you know whether this guy's creating tens or not. So there's an art to it that people learn to identify over time, that whether that operator and those team members are delivering the brand promise or they aren't. The data almost always confirms yes or no, they are or they're not. And people now understand that the healthiest measure of the brand, certainly same-store sales is crucial, profit margin is crucial, but the long-term, the most important brand, sure, Cathy was right, the most important measurement is the growth of the brand and keeping it healthy and relevant. And in the case of Chick-fil-A, also fun. It's a value that's crucial to them.
I love it. And you could talk more. You talk more in your book, like I have right here in my hand. So many great takeaways from today's conversation. Fans want to dig into it. Teams want to learn more about how it was built, even a little bit more in the weeds on some of the other things. You explain it all in Covert Cows. I'm going to put a link in my show notes to someone. It's available on Amazon, Books A Million, all the different places.
Yes, it is. It sure is. And also bulk books. Yeah.
Perfect.
Sure
So I'll put a link in the show notes. Fans can click on through and buy the book. And then Steve Robinson Consulting. Tell us a little bit about that. I know you and I could talk for hours, but what is Steve Robinson Consulting?
Well, I do a little consulting and I do a little speaking, and I'm sincere when I say little. I like not working full time, quite frankly. I do some consulting primarily for smaller, early generation businesses, entrepreneur businesses. I like working with them. I feel like I'm back in the 80s with Chick-fil-A. But only customer-focused, end-user customer-focused businesses. And so far, only businesses that are privately owned. I haven't found much, I hadn't had much interest in working with publicly owned companies. They tend to have a much shorter term horizon than a lot of my experience. A lot of what I have to say doesn't ring bells with them because a lot of them are thinking I'm not going to be here 5 years from now. So, yeah. So mostly entrepreneurs and privately owned.
And I'm sure the sports team getting started, they could reach out to you, bring you in, talk a little bit more about how to create a better.
I've worked with sports for 23 years. I love it. Both the event side as well as the media side. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, I appreciate you sharing so much insight, sharing the history, giving us all a lot to think about when it comes to improving our fan experience inside of our arenas or ballparks or what have you across America. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Jeremy. You're welcome. And by the way, my parting shot is one of the places I learned the most about this experience thing was with the Boston Red Sox. Yeah. So if you've never been to a Red Sox game and you're in the sports business, you need to get your fanny up there and go to a game.
Sounds like it's well worth it.
It is. All right. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.